Good morning, good night, good afternoon, and welcome to Concerned Citizen of South Sudan. Today is February 12th, 2023. As you can see the below screen here tonight, we are discussing a very, very important topic tonight, the border crisis between our country and the neighboring countries. And also, we stand with solidarity to our brother, Maurice Mabior Awikjok back, who has been kidnapped in Nairobi and been taken to South Sudan and arrested by national security. So our solidarity with him today as well. So with that border crisis between our country and the neighboring countries, free Maurice Mabior Awikjok back, who has been detained. So welcome to Concerned Citizen of South Sudan, the viewers of Concerned Citizen of South Sudan. As I said, this is the most very, very, very important topic that we are discussing tonight. The border issues, the genesis of the issues, how it started. But with that, I want to walk you through first. What triggered all this thing and why our neighboring countries are having problem, why they are trying to take junk of our country. What is the interest? What triggered all of this? First of all, before we gain our independence in 2011, South Sudan have been struggle for 22 years fighting the war of liberation. And I want to give you figures of the countries that actually are giving South Sudan hard time, and they don't want South Sudan actually to be stable. First of all, I want to give you figures, economic figures, when it comes to Uganda and Kenya. In 2005, this is when the CPA was signed. Uganda GDP, and when I say GDP, I'm talking about, growth domestic product, and that gross domestic product includes, if we are paying money there, that's the gross, domestic product. If we are taking our children for the school there, that's the gross domestic product for Uganda. So GDP, that means that growth domestic product for Uganda. And you all aware that South Sudanese, officials, they have been taking their children to Uganda to acquire education. They have been renting houses in Uganda. They have been doing a lot of businesses. They have been importing food from Uganda and so forth. So that tell you about gross domestic product. So in 2005, Uganda GDP in $1 billion, they have only $9.239 billion. Okay, these are the GDP of Uganda in 2005. So $9.239 billion. I want to walk you through 2005. And in 2007, Uganda GDP has increased. And this is not coming from a blue. It came as a result. South Sudan now is doing more business with Uganda. We are importing food from Uganda, and we are doing businesses. We are putting our children in school there. So that elevated their GDP, which is from 9.23, you can say like $9 billion, all entire country GDP in that time in 2005. And it jumped in 2007 to $11.9 billion. So that means another 2 point something billion dollars has been added. And this all because of what? Because of South Sudan, is preparing to gain independence, and we are doing more businesses. We were not bringing goods from the north. We were not bringing goods from Khartoum. We were not bringing a lot of things from there. All the food products, they were coming through our southern border from there. So we were doing business. Okay. And in 2009, also, Uganda GDP jumped to 25.13 billion dollars. $25.13 billion in 2009. And you see it has been going up, every year has been growing. And the reason I'm talking about this, I will tell you why the neighboring countries are very hostile to the Republic of South Sudan. Why all problems are happening in our, they're giving South Sudan. They don't want South Sudan to be stable. Why they are doing this? Because South Sudan, it is a hunting ground for them. It is a hunting field for them. 2009, Uganda, it became economically, has been growing up $25.13 billion. In 2010, it jumped up to 26.67 billion, almost $27 billion that time. Okay. Right after independence, when South Sudan gained independence, right there, okay, Uganda, it jumped up to $27.8 billion. By the way, this is very important. The thing that I'm talking about, some people, they may ignore it, but this is the most important thing. Okay, the most important thing. That's why you have seen Uganda, how they play negative role, in South Sudan, not to allow South Sudanese to get together and to bring peace to the country, because they are the real beneficial of the war and of the independence of South Sudan. So $27 billion after we gain independence. Okay, in 2022 to 2023, we are talking about the Uganda now have $42.6 billion GDP. Growth domestic product now is what? 4.2, which is $42.6 billion. That's why we have seen Uganda doesn't want stability in South Sudan. Okay? They didn't want any stability in South Sudan. Whatever the problem that they can have, they can instigate anything for South Sudan not to be stable, so they can continue, to prosper from the suffering of people of South Sudan. This is Uganda alone. Of course, Sudan, the country that we break away of, they have lost actually. Sudan used to have $100 billion, but right now you are talking about $37 billion because they lost the great natural resources of oil, which was the main income for the country of Sudan. Let me go to Kenya. The country that actually we are going to focus more today, the country that we are talking about, the border crisis between our country and the neighboring countries, which is Kenya right now. They are invading our territory, which is Nadapal and Narus and the Lima Triangle. So let me tell you about Kenya. Why Kenya is become more aggressive, what triggered them, what the interest that they are gaining from South Sudan. In 2005, Kenya GDP, which is gross domestic product, Kenya only have $18.74 billion. They did not have a lot of income. There's a lot of Kenyans without job. Kenya only depend on tourism. People who are coming from tours, book hotels, traveling, go to national park, and that's the only thing that they're getting. Plus, they grow coffee, and then they export coffee. These are the only thing that Kenya, are acquiring their national income. Okay. Now, as that said, Kenya in 2005, their gross domestic product was only $18.74 billion. In 2010, it jumped up to $45.41 billion. Imagine from 18. Okay, from $18 billion to $45 billion. Okay, now in 2022, we are talking about Kenya GDP, gross domestic product, $117.19 billion. I already give you a hint about Uganda, how Uganda acquire the money and why Uganda become more growing when it comes to GDP. It's because South Sudan, since we have an autonomy in Southern Sudan that time, we become more dependent on what? Product coming from Uganda, food, medicine, fuel even. All these things, we have been bringing them from where? From Uganda. And that actually elevated their income from just being $9.239 billion to $42 billion. We are renting apartment there. We are renting houses. We are buying, banana. We are buying all sort of stuff from Uganda. That helped them. Plus, we are giving them employment opportunities. They are coming to South Sudan. They are working. They are sending money back home. We are employing their teachers. We are taking our children there. And instead of bringing their teachers to our country to teach our children, we are taking our children there, and we are what? We are renting from them. So that's helped a lot. That's helped a lot, and it make them to the position they are in now. The same thing, the same case with Kenyan. Kenyan, from being what? From having only $18 billion in 2005, all the way to $117 billion. And actually, South Sudan that time, in 2007, 2009, South Sudan have nearly $20 billion, which is mean that no comparison to Kenyan economy. And we were not even country that time. GDP for South Sudan was $20 billion. You are talking about 2007 to 2009. So we were higher than Kenya and Uganda at that time. Now South Sudan become more dependent on them. We are sending our children there. We are renting houses there. We are buying houses there. We are bringing food there. Plus we are renting a port part of Mombasa. We are renting a port there. So we are giving them a lot of money. We constructed road, which is Joba Numali Road, and it go through Uganda, and from Uganda go to Kenya, to Mombasa, and then from Mombasa going onward. So they are gaining more. So the reason I talk about this, I want to link it why we are having issues with the neighboring countries, right? And I said this in 2017, that actually South Sudan fought for justice, liberty, and prosperity. But after we gained our independence, we did not have a national plan. Knowing that actually the neighboring countries that we have, Sudan, Ethiopia, Uganda, Sudan, and others, Sudan depend more in agriculture. They used to depend on oil as well. But what we break away from them, we took chunk of huge national resources, which is the oil. Now Sudan is a natural enemy and is an obvious. You remember in 1945, when Pakistan break away from India, they become a rival because that's a natural thing. Our political leadership, they should have assumed that actually Sudan is going to be our natural enemy. But we have to work around that. By what? By having a national plan, by developing a plan, knowing that South Sudan, it is a deadlocked country. And if South Sudan is a deadlocked country, it is necessarily for us to think and use the income of the oil, to promote the agricultural, so we can produce our food locally. This is the plan that should have happened. But our politicians, they did not actually care about that. And they move on. And that's why 2 days ago, when I was giving an opportunity to speak on the room, the clubhouse, that was opened by the SPLM-IO. And actually, I gave an example of a squirrel and how a squirrel always, when he's running away from the enemy, when he's running away from the hunter, is likely to hide. But because he has a long tail, when he gets into a hole underground, is likely to leave his long tail out. So South Sudan actually, after we gained our independence, we did not plan enough. We did not have that national planning. And that national planning actually should have include having more refineries in our country. We should have even not thinking about exporting the crude oil, because when you export crude and oil, you have the natural enemy, which is Sudan, and the oil is going to go through what? Through the transit through the Sudanese territory. And if we are going through Sudanese territory, they are likely to impose the discriminatory fees. And they did actually in 2012 during a cooperation agreement. See, because we did not have a plan. But if we had to have a refineries in our country so we can refine the oil, and then we will have a consumer, which is Ethiopia, 100 some plus million people living there. They will consume more oil and more and more and more oil. You see? But we did not plan doing that. And that's why later these countries, Sudan is start manipulating and it start, putting too much on our borders. We still have disputed areas right now with the Sudanese, in the north. But it shouldn't happen because the borders are clear. In 1956, that always go back to a national plan that we did not have. We did not have a good refineries. We did not create refineries And we did not have a national plan that actually, knowing South Sudan is a deadlock, and we did not use the fund from the oil to promote the agriculture so we can produce food locally. And that actually will elevate our GDP, which is domestic growth product. We did not do that. It would have created more opportunity. Now, Kenya and Uganda, as I said from the beginning, Kenya, they depend on what? They depend on agriculture, little agriculture, but majority of them, they depend on the tourism. And it's because they depend on tourism, and now knowing that there is a new country here rising up, independent of South Sudan, with the natural resources that they have, we have the oil, we have the mining, we have all these rivers, we have all kind of natural resources and tourism. South Sudan is likely to be the destination of investors, whether they are from the west or they're from the east. And Kenya actually didn't want this to happen, right? They did not want this to happen because they depend on tourism. But if there is another country here right now dependent on tourism, that's going to compete with them, right? So Kenya, they did their best ability to come and exploit the resources of South Sudanese. And that's why we see the KCB, all the money has been going there, and Kenya, they have been used as the money laundering people for the official in South Sudan. They did actually, and they succeeded. And that's why their GDP jumped up to 117 from being $18 billion to 117. So I want you, as the people of South Sudan, to understand this, why we are a target, why our country is a target from the neighboring countries. And not only that, now they see that South Sudan, there is a potential that actually peace will prevail, and people of South Sudan, they are likely to come together and focus on their own affair of the country. That's why they start coming in and invading the territories, so, bordering, so South Sudan can have more dispute and can have more problem. Why? Because they are likely to manipulate later. Because we are getting our goods through their ports. We are renting their ports. You see? So now they knowing that we are needing them. So now they are more interested in economic in South Sudan. They are taking money from the port that we rented. Our official, they bought a lot of properties in Kenya. Their children are there. Okay? We are employing them. KCB, so forth. There are so many things that Kenya are benefiting. So now they have to create sort of an issue with South Sudan so they can manipulate and continue to manipulate. In 2017, also, I talk about the Uganda. How Yoweri Museveni actually knew that this country called South Sudan, if they really move toward democracy, is likely to impact the Ugandans. Because he has been ruling these people for a very long time under his dictatorship, and nothing has happened, nothing has changed. If South Sudan become a democratic, they will likely have an influence on the Ugandan peoples. That's why he came with all this sort of a weird advice. In fact, actually, President Kiir was not dictator from the beginning. He didn't have an idea that he wanted to be a dictator, but he invented the ideas from Yoweri Museveni, because he gave him that advice that you can do this, you can do this, you can use the community, and you can maintain the power for a very long time. So these are the reasons. I'm just trying to give you a hint why the neighboring countries are continuing to do this, because they want South Sudan to be in the position that they are in right now. South Sudanese are not benefiting from their independence. They are not benefiting from the national resources that they have. And instead, Kenya is number one benefiting from the resources of South Sudan, from employment, okay, to exploiting the resources of the country. It's the same thing with the Uganda, from $9 billion to $42 billion. And Kenya from $18 billion to $117 billion. So it's a good thing. So that's why they wanted to continue to maintain that and suppress and keep South Sudan in a position that they are in, not to grow and not to go anywhere. So tonight, as I said from the beginning, we have a very important topic. We'll be discussing with the chairman of United Citizens for Change, Ustaz Dengdi Ayok, will join us by Clubhouse, the border crisis between our country and the neighboring countries. And also, as I said from the beginning, free Maurice Mabior Awikjok. Mabior Awikjok actually is an activist. He has been activist here on Concerned Citizens of South Sudan. in 2020 and 2021. Only last year that we have not been seeing him, 2020, 22 and 2023. This year, we have not seen being more active, in our forum. But actually, he is one of the activists that have appeared in numerous times on concerned citizen of South Sudan, who has been abducted in Kenya and been taken to South Sudan and put in the detention of national security, the Blue House. So with that, I would like actually to play that issue of abduction of Morris and being taken to South Sudan before I bring in my guest, Ustaz Dengdi Ayok, and then we can do more. And later we can do a solid presentation about the border issues with the neighboring country, particularly Kenya, that we are focusing today. So let me go ahead and play these clips, and then later I will bring in Ustaz Dengdi Ayok so we can continue the discussion. Please, I ask you, if you are watching it on the Facebook, I want you to share this live episode, okay? If you are watching on YouTube, go ahead and share it as well. Our channel there is John Cormayol, okay? We have so many people that are not aware that we are going live today. We want them to know, because this is a very, very, very important issue. This is a matter of national security of our country. This is not even like internal issues that we have been discussing every single time. But this is a national issue. This is territorial integrity of our country. So please go ahead and share it and like it. Share it and like it. So let me go ahead and play this video before I bring in Ustaz Dengdi Ayok, and then we continue the discussion.
Sudanese political and human rights activist who has been living in Kenya for the last 2 years is in distress after their kin was arrested on Saturday last week by unknown people and taken to an undisclosed location. Morris Mabior Awikjok, who was seeking asylum in Kenya following a fallout with some government officials back in South Sudan, was picked up by armed people believed to be police officers from his Kangundo Road house in Nairobi. And as our very own Emily Jabet reports, some officers from a nearby police post claim that detectives from the Kenya Anti-Terror Police Unit were behind the arrest. The ATPU has since denied the claims. Take a listen.
A house in disarray, a clear indication of a confrontation that occurred on Saturday evening between the occupants of this house and people believed to be police officers. According to Angelina Aliet, the wife of the missing activist, 5 men and a woman trailed her husband from the shop to the house and demanded that she opens the door. The armed men who came in 2 vehicles ransacked the house without uttering a word. They confiscated their phones and laptops and other valuables before handcuffing her husband, Morris Mabior Awikjok.
He always says he is not happy with how South Sudanese government is doing things. He always questions the government and hold it responsible for all the suffering.
He's going to talk about these issues, about this corruption, about this one man who's taking the country as his own thing. He believes this one person is actually holding the democracy of the country in his hand. He's the one who decides what to do with people and what not to do. So he felt like this guy is the one destroying the country. He has been pleading with the president most of the times to actually replace him with somebody that can do better.
4 days later, the family of Mabior has no idea of his whereabouts, with a few social media posts indicating that he may have been taken back to his country.
She doesn't know whether the people that were sent here were from Kenyan government or Akol's government that sent his people and abduct my husband.
They have not informed us about his arrest as the family and friends. Nobody has confirmed anything to us. For us now, we are thinking of the worst. Maybe he has fallen like the rest of the people that were also taken from here in Kenya, and they have been assassinated.
2 police officers stationed at Hurlingham East Police Post, just meters from Mabior's house, told Citizen TV that officers from the Anti-Terror Police Unit based in Nairobi area took Mabior. ATPU has since denied the claims. Amnesty International has since condemned Mabior's arbitrary arrest and detention. In a statement, Amnesty International Executive Director Houghton Irungu says in part, Amnesty International has documented numerous arbitrary detentions by the government of South Sudan through the National Security Service in multiple facilities where detainees are often subjected to torture and other ill treatment, some held incommunicado without access to a lawyer or family members. Irungu is calling on the Kenyan and South Sudanese authorities to get to the bottom of this. Emily Chebet, Citizen TV.
Okay. There you have it. So our colleagues, the activists, Mabior, has been kidnapped in Kenya. Now the Kenyan authority are not even clear about this. The police denied. They said that they have no idea about it. And he ended up on the custody of national security in Juba. So who abducted him? Them. So we want you to be aware of this, and we stand with solidarity with our colleagues who really is standing for justice and liberty and prosperity of the people of South Sudan. We were hoping that the visit of Pope actually will change things, but it seemed like things are still going in a wrong direction. As we discuss the border crisis today, I would like to bring in Ustaz Dengdi Ayok by Clubhouse to weigh in on the arrest of Mabior and taken to the national security custody in Juba. And then we'll continue with our presentation today about the crisis on the borders with the neighboring countries. So, Ustaz Dengdi Ayok, if you hear me, please open your microphone. And I want us to focus on English today. I want Kenyan to understand. I want them to know. I want them to get our message. And Uganda, any neighboring countries to get our message. This is the country that actually has only $18 billion, from $18 billion to $117 billion. And the wealth coming from South Sudan. The same thing with Uganda, from $9 billion to $42 billion. And the wealth, South Sudan was the hunting ground. And they continue. And that's why they are creating more political dilemma and crisis. So South Sudanese can remain at the same, and they are the beneficiary. They are the dividend of our independence, the dividend of the Republic of South Sudan. So Dengdi Ayok, if you hear me, please, I yield the microphone to you. And please share and like this video. This is a matter of national security. National security is not just about, arresting people or talking about the president, talking about the government. No, it's about whole country. And that's what we care more about. Dengdi, please.
Assalamu alaikum, Ustaz Jonkur. تسمعني كده?
Yes, I hear you very well, Ustaz Dengdi.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Jonkur Mayol, for the chance. I greet you in the studio, and I greet your viewers on the Facebook Live show and on the YouTube as well. I also greet our audiences on Clubhouse who have gathered here to listen to the discussion tonight, this morning, and this afternoon. I would like to begin by saying that I want to tell you that we are apprehensive or concerned because the current status of affairs in our country is completely contrary to our expectations, to our dreams, and to our ambition as a people. We are concerned because the current state of affairs in our country is a great setback and a frustrating nightmare. And therefore we are concerned. We are concerned because the current situation in our country is a complete political deadlock, as eloquently was described in the National Dialogue final report in November 2020. We are very much concerned about the ongoing situation in our country because the current situation gives us a picture that the future, which is awaiting our children, which is awaiting our grandsons and our granddaughters, is a bleak one if it is not corrected accordingly. Because the current SPLM leaders, the current SPLM elites continue to run the affairs of our country in a wrong manner, in a way that is not serving the national interests of our people. And based on this reality, we in the UCC and the rest of the opposition must work very hard to serve the country and bring about a drastic political change that will bring about a new political dispensation that shall be responsible in terms of national responsibility toward the citizens of South Sudan in delivering them basic services which are badly needed, and keep the territorial integrity of South Sudan, restore security and stability, and bring about good governance, a new good governance, a new political administration that will turn South Sudan into an economic and industrial zone, so that we can manufacture our own products using modern technology. And that's why we always say that our dream and our ambition and our program are to create a progressive society in South Sudan in all aspects of life. And for us to make this dream and program a reality in South Sudan, we must rise above tribal differences, ethnic divides, and relegations. We must rise above all this tribal agitation, tribal bigotry, and inciting and agitating others to hate others, and promoting hate speech toward other people. And so we must also stop the madness of political extremism and hostile political propaganda, antagonism, and the use of derogatory terms and vulgar language and invalid accusations such as looking at others and depicting them as unpatriotic or traitors. Because in the end of the day, we are all nationalists, we are all patriots in our own different ways, behaviors, and the views that we hold and the views we express publicly in front of others. We are all nationalists. No one is hired by someone or an agent working for someone or to somebody. No one is a nationalist based on the criterion of someone else. And therefore, narrow thinking and narrow judgment does not work in national matters. And I want to assure you that we are born to work for the welfare of our country, and we have equal rights as citizens in this country. No one is superior and no one is inferior. No one has a right to determine the destiny of others, because we are all equally masters of our own destiny, and we are all responsible for this country. No one has a right to arbitrarily arrest somebody and detain him in an isolated detention facility, such as what happened to our brother and our colleague, the activist Maurice Mabior Awikjok, who was arrested in Nairobi City on Saturday, the 4th of February 2022, which was the second day of the Pope visits to our country. Mabior was arrested in Nairobi by people who were wearing police uniform, and they were Kenyans, plus other South Sudanese who were in plain clothing. They are believed to be members of the national security. So the guy was arrested, kidnapped, and he was taken to a unknown location within Nairobi city. The next day, he was reported to have been taken to Juba and placed in a detention, in the national security detention facility in Juba. And as you have seen in the video, it was reported on the Citizen TV in Kenya. The news was read out by Jeff Koinange himself, and it was backed up by another report. So Mabior is right now after he was reported to have been brought to Juba on Sunday the 6th, the 5th. Nobody is aware of his whereabouts as we speak now, because he is detained in what is described as they use a very good word there in the report. They say incommunicado. Incommunicado is a place where you are detained and you have no connection with people from the outside world. It is an isolated detention within the place where they detain people. You have no communication, you cannot talk to anyone, you are cut off from the rest of the world. That is the situation of our colleague Mabior Awikjok as we speak here. And so everybody is traumatized. His wife, Angelina Aliet, as you have seen in the video, is speaking and she's traumatized because she's alarmed of whether her husband will come back alive or not. And she has all the right to be alarmed because we all remember that in 2016, James Gadet was kidnapped from Nairobi and brought to Juba. Dom Samuel Luak and Agri Isboni Idri were kidnapped on January 23rd, 2017, and they were brought to Juba. Later on, they were killed by the national security in Luri, and the report was released by the UN, and the spot where they were killed also, the pictures of their execution were also released on the internet, and everybody saw that. So when we hear that somebody is arrested and kidnapped from Nairobi by the national security and brought to Juba, the chances of him remaining alive are always very rare. And this is the same thing which he is repeating himself right now. And so I would like to take this opportunity to appeal to the national security authorities and to appeal to the highest office in the land that they have to release political activists and critique Maurice Mabior Awikjok, who was arrested on February the 4th, because we want him free. South Sudanese should be granted freedom of expression so that they express themselves in whichever way they do that. I remember when the president formed the National Dialogue Steering Committee, the members of the dialogue and the members of the national security that were going around with the National Dialogue Steering Committee were advised by the same president that allow the citizen to speak in whichever way they speak, even if they insult the government, allow them to speak. And so freedom of expression was granted to our people. And they spoke the way they wanted to speak. Now it is the same thing we are doing. We speak about many, many issues of concern in our country. Sometimes we speak with anger, and sometimes we speak with bitterness, not because we hate anybody, but because things are not going all right in our country.
Correct.
We speak in that manner because the situation is pathetic in our country. So we stand in solidarity with activists and a critical government critique, Maurice Mabior Awikjok back, and we appeal to the authorities to arrest him immediately so that peace and calm can return to his traumatized wife and children back in Nairobi, so that peace and calm can return to his family and his relatives. We are concerned about this because, you know, this national security of ours is infamous. It has a bad name. James Gadebdak survived because the revitalized peace agreement that was signed gave him a chance of being pardoned by the president, and he was later on released. But those of Dong Samuel Wag and Agri Isboni Idri were killed. They were executed. Others were killed. Those of Kirbino Wall were killed. People like Matthew Valentino were killed by the same national security. People like Boldemian, who was gunned down in November 2017 in Juba, could not survive the harassment of the national security. And due to the fact that our national security is infamous, people become afraid when an activist like this is arrested. In the report, they mentioned something about the Human Rights Watch. The Human Rights Watch actually wrote a letter to the president, and I want to read part of the letter. I got this report 2 days ago, and it is a very good report. We support what they said. We support their appeal for the release of activist Maurice Mabior Awikjok.
Go ahead, Dengit.
Sorry, I didn't get it here, but
we can get it later. You can continue.
Okay. Yes, I have to save time. I didn't get it because I have it on the same phone I'm speaking to you from. But I can recall the content. The content of the Human Rights Watch letter is that they have to release Maurice, and should he continue to be detained in that facility, he has to be allowed to have communication with his relatives. And the letter was directed to the president immediately. And the human rights also attacked several violations that were committed by the national security some years back, talking about those of Dong Samuel Wek and others who were victimized by the national security. And so Maurice Mabior Awikjok was very active on social media, criticizing the government and particularly the Director General of the National Security. And he was revealing some secrets. He was also active here on the Concerned Citizen of South Sudan.
Yes.
As mentioned earlier by Jonko. So we are in solidarity with him, and we appeal for the authorities for his release. Now, we must come back to the topic of today. The topic I would like to talk about is there on the screen, the border crisis between our country and the neighboring countries. The neighboring countries we mean here are the Republic of Kenya, the Republic of Uganda, the Central African Republic, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the Sudan. These are the countries we have border crisis with them. And nowadays, as you are all following, we have a lot of problems, border crisis arising here and there. And so this is the topic we are talking about today. I am making a presentation, and Jonko would be helping those of you who are watching it live on the Facebook live show. the Facebook video. I have a presentation written on the PowerPoint, and he would be doing the slide on the screen there.
Yes, we are up. I put the slide up.
Very nice. Everybody can see the border crisis between our country and the neighboring countries. The first thing we would like to talk about is the geopolitics and the economic interest. And I think Jonko touched on it already.
Yes.
What I want to say is that after our independence, we fall into the East African and Central African geopolitics as a new country. And when we say the East African geopolitics, we mean countries like Kenya, Tanzania, Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, Central African Republic, and the Democratic Republic of Congo, and the IGAD bloc. We have the IGAD bloc, you are all aware of that. And geopolitics usually refers to countries and relations between them. Geopolitics is used as a basis for analyzing politics and relations between countries that exist in one region and also in the entire world. The relations between the East African countries are based on a lot of things. They are based on diplomacy. They are also based on many cultural, social values and political principles which have become factors in relations. However, one factor is currently dominant over the others, and that is the economic interest factor. And so you find several countries existing in our sub-region of Africa, and the relations between them are based mostly on what we call the economic interest. So economic interests in the region play a great role, and it determines the relations between the nations. That is what is happening right now. And so this is the region we are in. Our relationships between Uganda, our relationship between us and Kenya, our relationship between us and Ethiopia, Rwanda, Tanzania, Sudan, are based on economic interests. Without this economic interest, the relations are likely to remain easy and also to remain not very close, not really very tight. So the economic factor actually determines numerous things in the relations. Now, we have a lot of border crises between us and the neighboring countries. These are 6 countries. From the north, you have Sudan. From the west, you have the Democratic Republic of Congo. And from the southwest, you have the Central African Republic. And from the immediate south, you have the Republic of Uganda. From southeast, you have Kenya. And from the east, you have Ethiopia. So we are bordered by how many countries? We are bordered by 6 countries, and we have border crisis with these countries. On slide number 3, we are talking about Elimi Triangle, which is now represent border crisis between us and the Republic of Kenya. And so on slide number 3, we start with the description of the region. I stated it very clear there that the Elimi Triangle is a territory located in the southeastern South Sudan. It had always been part of the Republic of the Sudan when the Sudan was still one country. It remained part of South Sudan following the succession of the former Southern Sudan region from the Sudan, which officially became the Republic of South Sudan on Saturday, July 9, 2011. It is sometimes referred to as Ilimi. It is a meeting point of our international frontiers with the frontiers of two neighboring countries, which are Ethiopia in the north and in the east, and Kenya from the south of Ilimi. This area is currently part of Kapoita East County of Eastern Equatoria State. So this is simply the description of the Ilimi Triangle. On slide number 4, you can see the map of Ilimi. It is in the shaded area. You can see it for those of you who are watching the video. You can see it. That is the territory. This is our territory. It is part of us. It had always remained part of the former Republic of Sudan, and it became part of South Sudan after our independence. Now we go to slide 5.
4.
In slide 5, we are. Yes, Jonkur, you can stop me at any time if you want to say anything.
We are on slide 4. Actually, the origin of the distortion of the name.
Yes, the origin and distortion of the name. If you look at the name of this triangle, it is called Ilimi Triangle. When I did my research, I got a number of findings, and according to Wikipedia and many other historical, anthropological, and sociological studies that I went through, the name Ilimi is originally Olemi. It became Ilimi with I or Ilimi with E after distortion and perversion. The name Olemi is a name of Anywa chief Olemi Akwon, who was a ruler and a dignitary in the area in the 19th century. This means that the area is named after the Anywa chief Olemi Akwon. And despite the fact that the Anywa community is an extended community into Ethiopia, the Ethiopian governments have never claimed it. However, the Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II had historically claimed Lake Turkana in Kenya, which is actually connected to the Ilimi Triangle from the north, as we shall show it later on in one of the maps that I have here. And so the Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II had historically claimed Lake Turkana in Kenya, and Ethiopian governments had always considered Ilimi as a Sudanese territory. In the 1902, 1907, and 1972 treaties, there are historical treaties that were made. So the Ethiopian government had always considered Ilimi as a Sudanese territory since 1902 and 1907, 1972, the time when Addis Ababa Agreement was signed. Now we go to the next slide. In the next slide, we touch on the total area space in kilometers. According to a study by Dr. Nani Umburu, the area measures about 14,000 square kilometers. Other sources that I have seen say that the area measures between 10,320 and 14,000 square kilometers. It is almost the same size of a BA area, after the July 2009 arbitration, and the size of Mississippi in the USA. And so you can see that it is bigger in size than some African countries, such as Mauritius. Those of you who know Mauritius. The size of Mauritius is 2,040 kilometers squares. This area is bigger than Sao Tome and Principe. Those of you who know the island of Sao Tome and Principe, the size of this island is 964 kilometers square. It is also bigger than Cape Verde, the island of Cape Verde in Africa, because the size of that island is 4,033 kilometers square. And it is bigger than Comoros Island because the size of Comoros Island is 2,235 kilometers
Square.
So you can see that one. It's a big, it's a bigger area than all these African countries. On slide number
6.
Okay. For me here, it is number 7. I think we have differences.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The economic
So
importance.
on my screen here, it is slide number 7. We are talking about the economic importance. Jonkor touched on this one earlier.
Yes.
The area of Elimi Triangle is rich with a lot of resources. One of these resources is pastures, green pastures for animals. And then it has water points. It has a lot of lakes and rivers. And pastures and water points are very important for the nomadic communities, such as the Toposa, such as the Didinga and Inyangatom, and the Desanic. These are the people in the area. And so it represents a source of life for their livestock, and it also represents an economic value. The area is also rich with minerals, it has petroleum, and it is also rich with wildlife. And not only that, it is also rich with woods, because we have woods and different type of birds in the area. Its nature was considered useless by Kenya before the discovery of oil in it. Kenya developed interest in Elimi Triangle for its economic importance, in line with her economic ambitions. That's why Kenya is encroaching and occupying this area. On the next slide, which is here number 8 for me, and I think it is number 7 at your end, Jonko. We put the map, and the map shows the size of the area, and the size of the area is 14,000 kilometers. I mean, square kilometers, sorry. On the next slide, we are talking about the people in this area. The peoples and communities living in the area are 4 in number. Number 1, the Toposa community. These are the people living in this area. The Toposa community they have what we call permanent presence in South Sudan. They are permanently within South Sudan. This is number 1, the Toposa. Number 2, we have the Nyangatom, and they are also called Inyangatom community. They move forth into Ethiopia and back to South Sudan. This means that they are citizens of both countries, South Sudan and Ethiopia. The third community is the Anuak community. They have a permanent presence in South Sudan as well as in Ethiopia. The fourth community is the Desanic people, and they are also known by other names. They are called Marile, and they are also called Geliba. So you have the Desanic community, in that area. They are Cushitic ethnic group, and they are found in South Sudan. They are also found in Kenya. They are also found in Ethiopia. Down there, I put something very important. I said important notice. We have people also staying in the Elimi Triangle. Who are these people? I think this is the community number 5 here. These are the Turkana. And I said important notice, the Turkana people's connection with the area is based on a seasonal interest. And this seasonal interest is grazing their cattle in the area. They are historically involved in raids on livestock with the Disanic people and the Taposa people. They are not South Sudanese by nationality, but they can be made South Sudanese as long as they cross the borders into South Sudan in search for pastures and waters. So there is status, Jonko.
Yes.
Yeah, you want to say something?
No. I moved to next slide actually, which is the focus point.
Turkana are not South Sudanese. They come seasonally in South Sudan in search for pastures and waters for their animal. So their status is like that one of the Rezegat in northern Bahr Ghazal state.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Malwal people allow the Rezegat to come into northern Bahr Ghazal to graze their animal seasonally. And there are peace conferences that are held between the Malwal community and the Rezegat. So the status of the Turkana is like that one of the Nasiriyah between them and the people of Abia. They are granted the right of coming into the area to graze their animal and get water for their animal, but they are not.
Northern Bahr Ghazalians.
They are not. They don't represent the indigenous people of the area. So that is the same status of the Turkana people on the border between South Sudan. They come forth to South Sudan. They go back to Ethiopia. They cross the border. So this one is very important for us to understand. On the next slide, I put the map. The Elimi triangle in the red circle.
Correct.
The area that is in the red circle, for those who are watching the video, is the area we call the Elimi triangle. You see it is written there, South Sudan, and then you have Ethiopia, and down you have
Kenya.
And in the middle you have the Elimi triangle. And they put the word disputed there. But this is not true. It is never a disputed area. Dispute actually arises on it, but it is not a point for dispute. On the next slide, we are talking about treaties, claims, disputes, encroachments, and occupation. The dispute over the boundary between the Sudan and Kenya arose for the first time in the year 1914. To solve the dispute, a straight parallel line was drawn by the British Empire to divide and separate between the Sudan and Kenya, which were both colonies of the British Empire. However, the nomadic herders, the Turkana people, continue to move to and from the border and traditionally graze their animals in the area to this day. If you go to the next slide, you see a map of the Elimi triangle between the three countries. And I show you the parallel line. The parallel line is a horizontal line that is in pink color.
Yes.
That is, this line is actually the border between Sudan and between South Sudan and Kenya. And this line was delimited in the year 1902. This line is known as Mode Line, and we shall come to that one. That is the border between our country and the sisterly neighboring country of Kenya. On the next slide, we have colonial maps of Sudan and Kenya from the year 1898. Different maps of Kenya showing the Elimi Triangle and how it looks like. If you go to that one of the 1999, you can see the Elimi Triangle there. If you go to that one of 1917, you can see it all on these maps. We continue with the treaties, claim, dispute, encroachment, and occupation. The Ethiopian Emperor Menelik II laid claim to the northern part of Lake Turkana and suggested a boundary with the British to run from the southern end of the lake eastward to the Indian Ocean. But the British shifted northward. There were negotiations, between the Menelik II, the Emperor of Ethiopia, and the British authorities, colonial authorities. After the negotiation, we are told that the British shifted northward when the British and the Ethiopian government signed a treaty in the year 1907. This treaty was reaffirmed by the 1970 Ethiopia-Kenya Treaty. These are all documents. People can go back to see these documents. We continue. In the year 1902 and the year 1903, the Ethiopia-Sudan boundary was surveyed by Captain Philip Mote, a member of the British Royal Engineers, and the border line which separated between the Sudan and Kenya was drawn by him. The line was known as Mote Line after his name. The drawn boundary was adopted by the Anglo-Ethiopian Agreement Treaty of December 6 in the year 1907. So what is the conclusion we are making here? The conclusion is that in the year 1902, 1903, the Ethiopia-Sudan boundary was surveyed, and it was surveyed by a British officer. His name is Philip Mote, and he's a member of the British Royal Engineers. So they drew the boundary, and the boundary was adopted by the colonial authorities. These colonial authorities are the Anglo-Ethiopian, and they adopted that boundary in the year 1907. This is how we understand it, based on the document we have seen. Now you can see the Mode Line, again, Mode Line in pink color. Down there you see Mode Line, and the year is 1902, Mode Line. Up you can see the red line, and further up you can see another line called blue line, and we are coming to that very soon. On the next slide, we are told that in the year 1914, the Uganda-Sudan Boundary Commission agreement provided the Sudan the right to have access to Lake Turkana via the new dry Sanderson Gulf at the southeast corner of the Elimi. At that time, Lake Turkana was the border line between the British territories of Uganda and Kenya. And after the World War I, the Ethiopians armed the Nyangatom people and the Desanek peoples with the aim of empowering them to protect themselves from the frequent attacks and cattle raids by the rival communities that exist with them in that area. And so the traditional livestock raids eventually and sadly turned into bloody battles, and many people were killed as there were confrontation between them. So these are historical facts for those of us who would like to know the history of the Ilimi tribe. If you go to the next slide, which is number 18 at my end here, I think it is 17 there with Jonko.
Correct.
In the year 1928, the Sudan agreed to allow Kenya military units across the 1914 line to protect the Turkana peoples against the Disanic and Nyangatom people's attack. So you see, there was an agreement made between Sudan and Kenya in the year 1928. What was the content of the agreement? The content of the agreement was that the Kenya military units were allowed to exist in the area. And the reason why they were allowed to exist in the area was to give protection to the Turkana people who were in a constant fight with the Disanic and with the Nyangatom people. And so the agreement gave them a ground to stay in the area. They were not there. It means they were not there. So underline this. This one happened in the year 1928. Now, in the year 1929, Kenya began subsidizing Sudan to take over the territory which it did not wish to control for its useless nature. It means Kenya gave up the area to Sudan in the year 1929 because this area was not useful for them. It was useless for them. So they gave it up to Sudan and their soldiers went back to Kenya. Again, in the year 1931, the Sudan agreed to subsidize Kenya to control the area. Another agreement was reached between the two countries, that is Sudan and Kenya. So Sudan agreed this time to hand over the area to the control of Kenya. You see this chronological history of the area, back and forth, yes. And so I put a map there on the next slide. Up there it is written the Turkana peoples always cross the mud line from northern Kenya into Sudan, which is now South Sudan. Because we were Sudan before we became South Sudan. And so you can see the mud line. Down it is written Kenya, and along the line it is written Turkana, which means they cross this line into the Sudan, into the Ilimi Triangle. And the lines we talked about earlier are also demonstrated in this, in this map. Let's go further. The next slide, we are told that in the year 1931, the red line, it has also got another name. It is called the Glendary line. In this year, that is the year 1931, this line was drawn for the second time to represent the northern boundary of Turkana grazing area. It was not drawn with an intention of annexing it to Kenya. It was a delimitation to show the grazing area of the Turkana people. And so in series of agreements from 1929 up to 1934, the Governor General of the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan and the Governor General of Kenya agreed that the red line should be accepted as the Turkana grazing boundary. So they were allowed to cross this line because it was a grazing boundary for them, but not because it was their country. This one has to be very clear. Now we go to the next slide. In the next slide, again, I said the red line. I put the red line there, and the red line is there in the red color. So this red line was drawn so that the Turkana people were given the access of crossing the mode line into the area of the red line. So you can see the red line on this map. If you look further beyond the red line, you see the blue line. We will come across that later. Now let's go to the next slide. In the year 1936, Italy attempted the invasion against Ethiopia and claimed the area, and a joint Kenya-Sudan border survey team in the year 1938 was formed, and it demarcated the red line, also called Wakefield. This red line is also called Wakefield line, marking the northern delimitation of grazing area for the Turkana people. So you can see history is repeating itself here. The colonial condominium rule of Egypt and Britain in the Sudan accepted the 1938 red line. It was confirmed by the colonial authorities in the Sudan. And in the year 1941, the King's African Rifle, these were, I think this was a contingent of soldiers. They were a contingent of soldiers. In this year, 1941, the King's African Rifle occupied the Elimi Triangle during the Second World War. They occupied this area because they were passing through it on their way to East Africa, because they were going there to participate in the war on the orders of the colonial authorities at the time. Again, in the year 1944, the British Foreign Office surveyed a blue line. I talked to you earlier about the blue line. So this blue line was drawn in the year 1944, which was further northwest than the red line. The Sudan established in the year 1950 their own patrol line further northwest into Sudan up to the border with Ethiopia, and prohibited Ethiopians and Kenyan nomads from movement into the area. Now, what happened in the year 1950 was the drawing of a line which was known as patrol line, because soldiers go patrolling. And so the line where they stopped was this line. It was drawn in the year 1950. And when this line was drawn, it doesn't mean that the area was given up to Kenya. It was a line where they stop when they come patrolling. That was in the year 1950. During the periods from 1949 up to 1946, up to 1956, sorry. During the period from 1949 up to 1956, that is the year in which Sudan became an independent country, the Sudan could not control the area due to civil war that was raging in southern Sudan. So Sudan pulled out from the area and could not manage the area due to insecurity that was persisting in the area. So we started from 1902, coming to 1920s, to 1930s, to 1940s. We now reach to the 1960s. During the 1960s and the 1970s, Jomo Kenyatta's administration, the first president of Kenya, had made a lot of proposals to the British to secure support for controlling the Elimi Triangle. However, the British were unresponsive, and Kenya had been partially in control of the area based on colonial delimitation, because a lot of lines were drawn so that the Turkana people were allowed to come in to graze their animals. So Kenya started that gradual encroachment coming into the area under the pretext of allowing the nomads to come into the Sudan to graze their animals. And then in the year 1964, Kenya and Ethiopia reaffirmed their boundary, confirming Kenyan sovereignty to a place called Namruputh in southeastern point of the Elimi Triangle. Now, in the year 1972, the year in which the Addis Ababa peace agreement was signed, a Sudan-Ethiopia boundary alteration didn't solve. Yes, I think there is a mistake there. Didn't solve the Elimi issue because it didn't involve Kenya, but did confirm that Ethiopia had no claim to the Elimi Triangle. That's what happened in the year 1972. During the 1980s to the 1930s, after the advancement of the Sudan People's Liberation Army into the Sudan from Ethiopia and controlled the area up to Lokishogio in Kenya. This is another vital information people should know, that in the 1980s and the 1990s, the Sudan People's Liberation Army advanced into the Sudan from Ethiopia, and they control not only the Elimi Triangle, they control the Elimi Triangle, and they went as far as to the Lokishogio inside Kenya. And by the way, Lokishogio was a place where the wounded soldiers of the SPLA were taken for treatment. Those soldiers that were wounded around Kapoita and Turid, those who were wounded in Western Equatoria, those who were wounded in Central Equatoria, even those from Nasser, Joko, from the areas of Malakal, from the far areas of Bargazal, were brought back to Lokishogio to be treated. This is a historical information that people also should understand. Now, we are going a little back again. In the year 1978, Kenya began to publicly and unilaterally regard the Turkana grazing line of the year 1938 as an international boundary between Kenya and the Sudan. That was the year in which Kenya started to consider that area as part of their country. In the year 1986, Kenya began to produce and widely circulate a new map, which for the first time displayed Elimi Triangle as part and parcel of its territory. So, dear South Sudanese, this is the year in which Kenya produced and widely circulate a new map for the first time. And that map actually displayed the Elimi Triangle as part and parcel of the Republic of Kenya. It all started in the year 1986. Now, from the 1990s up to the time of our independence in the year 2011, up to the present time, there has been a question as to whether a secret agreement was broached between Southern Sudan, which is now officially South Sudan, and Kenya, to allow Kenya to administer this territory in exchange for a benefit. Many people have been asking this question. Was there a secret agreement between the then Southern Sudan and now the Republic of South Sudan and the neighboring Republic of Kenya? Was there a secret deal between them in an exchange for a benefit? Many people actually ask this question. So the answer to this question is yes, there has been what? A secret deal. And so you can see our government made some mistakes, or our leaders. And I want to say that with the declaration of our independence in July 2011, the matter of this area was transferred to the government in Juba. However, the government of Southern Sudan in the year 2009 signed an agreement in Nairobi on establishing a temporary border control post at Nadapal in a document that I have seen. And I own this document. The document is here with me. Our government, the regional government in 2009, signed an agreement with the government of Kenya. What was the agreement about? The agreement was about establishing a temporary border control post. Where? At Nadapal. And where is Nadapal? Nadapal is within the Elimi Triangle, and it is part of our land. The document is even circulating on social media. This document was signed by General Awikjok, who was then the Minister of Regional Cooperation in the government of Southern Sudan. And it was signed by another professor called Samuel Sato from Kenya. I saw the document, I printed it out, and I have it. This was the secret deal we will sign between the government of Southern Sudan and the government of Kenya. And looking at the document critically, the government is to be held accountable for signing such a secret deal without involving the people through consultations. And so Kenya now occupies Nadapal based on that deal. So who is the cause behind the occupation of Kenya to this area? It is the government in Juba. So the people of South Sudan should be made to understand that our leaders have made a grave mistake by signing that secret deal in 2009 with the government of our neighboring and sisterly country, the Republic of Kenya. Now, what is the reaction of our people? You are all aware that last week a fighting erupted in the area there between our people and the soldiers coming from Kenya to invade that area. It is already invaded, but they are advancing further, deeper into our land. I think Jonko should play some videos.
I do.
Regarding this. The video fighting, I think, should be played.
Turkana munte kere monde jerb gala monde jabe jay.
Fast, we are now fighting in Nadapal. Say fast, guys. Very fast. We are under attack now, guys. Say fast now.
Okay. You see that was the fighting and also the protests. I can play protests.
Yes, the reaction of the people is that people protested. You can play the.
Daniel, no voy a que ya pagan la que.
So this protest took place in Narus. So it was an amazing protest. Children, women, you name it, huge population, the Taposa people, they were protesting. And also the fight erupted. As I played a little bit earlier, the fight erupted there also in the border. وانا شغلت لكم قبل شويه فممكن نشغل ده تاني مره اخرى ده. Yeah, you can hear it.
Guys, very fast. We are now fighting in other pals. Say fast, guys. Very fast. We are under attack now, guys. Say fast now.
I believe these are Turkana on the run, saying that they are under attack. So, Dengit, can you continue?
Yes, thank you, Jonkor. Please avoid Arabic because we are doing it in English. We want our brothers from Kenya to get what we are saying because they understand English.
Indeed. Thank you.
Keep it up in English. You can mute yourself and you can come in, please, at any time you want to say something.
Okay.
So you have seen the reaction, the people's reaction towards Kenya's encroachment and occupation of the areas. 2 areas were occupied by Kenya last week. Area number 1 is called Nakuduk, and another area is called Narus. These 2 areas were encroached upon by the Republic of Kenya. And so the public reaction in South Sudan towards encroachment and occupation by Kenya to Nadapal, Nakuduk, and her advancement toward Narus, the public reaction now in South Sudan, starting from the common citizens to the governors, to the governor of Eastern Equatoria State, to the Eastern Equatoria MPs, and all South Sudanese in a total is a total rejection. The reaction of the people of South Sudan is that they are rejecting the Kenyan occupation of the Ilimit Triangle, and particularly these areas I mentioned. And so a bloody confrontation occurred last week, and it had resulted into the killing of 8 people. By this reaction, our government secret deal with Kenya in the year 2009 is now exposed. The citizens and MPs have been in vain calling on the very government which had signed a secret deal with Kenya to intervene and resolve the border dispute or the border crisis. That's what happened. The people of South Sudan should be made known, should be informed of what the government did. Now, I have a question here at the back channel from Anoka Nyanigang. What did South Sudan got in return for the deal, Brother Dengi Dayo? She's asking about the deal which was inked in 2009 between the government of Southern Sudan and the government of Kenya. What did South Sudan get in return? I did not get any information. I have to be very honest with you. I did not get any information as to what the government of Southern Sudan get in exchange for that deal. But what I know is that many of these government officials have their houses in Nairobi. Not just houses, they have mansions. They have palaces in Nairobi. They have luxurious houses in Nairobi. And they are running businesses and investment in Nairobi. Nairobi actually became a safe haven for them. That's what I know. And this is the short answer I can give my sister. Okay, on the next slide, the government's muted reaction. You have seen in the video that the reaction by the public or by the common men and women was very loud and it was raucous. They were not happy. But the reaction of the government is muted. It is a muted reaction. In other words, it is a soft reaction. It is not a serious one, such as that one of the citizens. According to the East African online newspaper edition of Friday, February 10, 2023, the government in Juba summoned Kenya's envoy to Juba, that is Samuel Nandwa, to protest against Kenya's encroachment in our territory. The Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, Deng Dao, said according to the newspaper that Kenya and Uganda are claiming part of our borderline. And according to the newspaper, Kenyan authorities denied encroachment into our territory. And Kenya's Foreign Affairs Cabinet and Secretary Alfred Mutua told the newspaper that Juba had not officially raised the matter to Nairobi. Look at the government reaction. It is a muted reaction. The newspaper reported that the Deputy Foreign Affairs Minister, Deng Dao, said that the Kenyan envoy in Juba was summoned to be questioned so that the government can protest against the actions which happened in the Limit Triangle. But another official from the other side of the government of Kenya, who is Alfred Mutua, is saying that Juba had not officially raised the matter to Nairobi so that it can be discussed. And so you can see, ladies and gentlemen, how the government is reacting toward this issue. The government is softly reacting. It is mutedly reacting to this issue because they are involved into it. They signed a secret deal in 2009. They are the one who established the Nadapal control post. And then the Kenyan authorities came and they put their building there. They built the immigration office there. And as we speak now, there are signposts in the area. Last week I saw on social media a signpost which says inside Nepal that you are now leaving the Republic of Kenya. That you are leaving the Republic of Kenya from Nepal and you are now getting into South Sudan. This is ridiculous. And it was done by our government. Thank God the time is exposing this government. The government's reaction toward this encroachment and occupation is muted. In other words, it means it is soft. It means that our government had been subdued in comparison to the reaction of the citizens, which is very loud and alert. It is uncompromised and it is patriotic. The reaction of the citizen toward the occupation of the Kenyan authorities to the Limit Triangle is uncompromised and it is very patriotic. While that one of the government is a soft one and it is a muted one, it is a subdued one. It means that the government of the Republic of Kenya has actually subdued the government of the Republic of South Sudan. And that's why you see them reacting in a very soft manner, in a manner which is not serious. You cannot see any sense of seriousness in the tone of their voices when they are reacting to this matter. The government's reaction comes mutedly like this because of the common interest between the two countries. And as far as you and I know, Nairobi is a safe haven for many of them and their families, and they therefore cannot speak loudly. It is a shameful condition. Now we have to ask another question. Why do our government officials mutedly react towards the issues of border with the neighboring countries? The answer is very simple. They cannot talk to the leaders of those countries about border issues because of the diplomatic relations and the diplomatic relations which are based on their individual interests, not interests of the peoples of this country, but interests of their own with those countries, and also because of their businesses and investments in those countries, their luxurious houses in those countries. Now, this is now the sad part of the story. Now the clock is ticking and time is going. And with passing of time, these areas will become part of those countries. And by the time we rise up from our internal mess, it would be very difficult for us to get back those countries. So we must act now. We are not ready to lose an inch of our land. This is now time to act. Another question, can Kenya's help for South Sudanese during liberation struggle be an exchange for a limit triangle? Because Kenyan, our brothers in Kenya and our sisters in Kenya, they claim that they have helped us, the people of South Sudan, when we were fighting for our country. And because they have helped us, they don't expect us to claim the area. We have to keep quiet and leave the area to be controlled by them, and then it is annexed to their country. To prove this point, I want to read a tweet by one of the Kenyan bloggers on Twitter. His name is Abraham Mutai. This is what he tweeted. He said, "We helped South Sudanese gain independence. We have hosted their warlords, their families, and their money here. They own property worth millions. Nairobi is a safe haven for them. Therefore, we don't expect them to lay claim on the limit triangle, which we have administered since 1938. End of the tweet. This tweet, when you look at it, it actually shows you the mentality with which some of our brothers and sisters in Kenya think. It shows you their mentality. Because some of them believe that because they have stood beside us during the War of Liberation, because they have helped us, they have all the right to take that part of our country with us keeping quiet, with us allowing them to take it, with us allowing them to come even inside Turin and Kapoita.
What's that, Dengdi?
But I'm going to ask some questions. Yes, Jonko.
Yeah, I want to make a comment. That tweet actually is ludicrous because, yes, Kenya have hosted our refugees, leaders of the SPLM in the past, but that doesn't give them right to take part of South Sudan because they have already helped. If you guys recall very well, from the beginning of this program, I was talking how Kenyan and Ugandans, they are the beneficial of independence of South Sudan, actually. How Kenyan have been over-rewarded. Because since we gained independence, we did not have a national plan, actually. So we can farm, we can build refineries, we can have our own, feed our people from the local product that we produce. I mentioned that Kenyan in 2005, Kenya GDP was $18.74 billion. And then since then, Kenyan economy started growing based on what they are getting from South Sudan. Today, we are talking about $117 billion GDP. Imagine 2007, 2009, South Sudan GDP was $20 billion. And Kenya was what? $18 billion. So actually they have been over-rewarded and they get actually more than they deserve. But when you help somebody, you don't expect that you're going to take from them. They have to help you. Well, Kenya is part of the international community. They signed treaty with the international community, okay, that actually refugees can cross the border and they can be granted a protection. So South Sudanese being refugees there doesn't give them right, say, oh, we're going to cut this part of chunk of land and give it to Kenya because we have helped them. Actually, we were so generous enough. This is because of weak politicians that we have in our country. That's why any neighboring country can do whatever they want. But that gentleman who wrote that tweet should understand, actually, they were down on the tank. They were so poor, but we gave them an opportunity, economic opportunity. They work in South Sudan, even in the government. And we are buying goods from them, motorless. We are renting the port, and they are gaining all this economic interest from South Sudan. So it should be a shame, actually, for writing that tweet, because South Sudan has offered more, especially to Kenya and Uganda. Look at Ethiopia, they opened their arm. Not only that, South Sudanese actually, they have killed Ethiopia in big numbers when Mengistu fall. But the Ethiopian now came up and said, hey, we hosted you, we rewarded you, we did this, we did you in Itang, in all this area, so we can take part of your land. Did they do that? Of course, as they did, this goes back to weak leadership that we have in the country. And it goes back to what I said from the beginning, because we did not have a national plan. And that's why we get manipulated easy. Uganda can manipulate, Sudan can manipulate, Kenya can manipulate, anyone can manipulate South Sudan. It's shame, shame, shame on him. From $18 billion to $117 billion. And all this coming from South Sudan. And they know it. They know it very well. They know it very well. And now they are doing this because they know this government, their children, their asset, the money, and everything is in Nairobi. Of course, they are not going to say anything. And that's why they are doing this. And that's why always you should plan ahead of time. Ustaz Dengdit, continue.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Now, with some Kenyan thinking this way, Abraham Motai thinks, their mentality is now very clear to the people of South Sudan. And so we ask some question. Did Kenya help South Sudanese during the War of Liberation? The answer is yes, they did. Did they host our warlords? Look at the word he's using. He's even using the warlords. They were not warlords. They were commanders of the liberation. So I object the use of the word warlords here. By the time they were fighting for the liberation of this land, they were commanders of the Sudan People's Liberation Army, a liberation army. They were commanding soldiers of a liberation army. He should say we have hosted their commanders, not their warlords, as he said. And he said we have hosted their families. Yes, Kenya did this. Many of our people were in Kenya. Some children were born there and they grew up there. Many refugees were in Kakuma refugee camp. Many people were in Nakuru. And many people were in Mombasa and in other major towns in Kenya.
And that's being a member of international community. When a war broke in the neighboring countries, you have an obligation as the hosting country to allow refugees to cross to your country. Kenya is a part of that. They signed that deal under international law. That's why they become member of UN. They did. Any country in this world, if there is a war now, I am in the United States, if there is a war in Mexico, and Mexican cross to the United States because of war, they cannot be rejected. They can be hosted until their country, acquire peace, and then they can go back. That's right. That it is a right. It's not something that they can come here, and brag about it. We hosted you. We did this. In fact, my brother Lino, mentioned here, Kenya actually did not participate in War of Liberation physically. Uganda, Ethiopia, they did. Ethiopia even provided the tanks. Okay, Ethiopia did. But actually, it's so laughable because what Kenya has done, they have limited themselves to what a neighboring country exactly under international law. And that's why they did not participate in war. They did not, because they were respecting international laws. But those brothers from Ethiopia and Uganda, they said, oh, we need to help these brothers. We need to involve. And they did. They didn't care about, holding back the arm and something like that. So Kenyan actually should be ashamed. They did not go deeper. They were just abide by international laws. And they said, okay, we can host the refugees. We can allow their commanders to stay here, but we cannot give them bullets. We cannot give them guns, and we cannot participate in war. If someone from Ethiopia at least can brag that we help you, I can say, oh, yeah, indeed, you did. Or from Uganda, I can say, yes, indeed. But someone from Kenya, that's ludicrous. Then we continue.
Yeah, thank you, brother. I think there is a comment by someone here who is actually supporting the topic. This is what he wrote. If there is another document signed by Eastern Equatoria State alone on October 1st, 2021. Yes, I got that document. The document is called Resolution of the Consultative Meetings of the Leaders of Turkana County Government, Kenya, and Eastern Equatoria State, South Sudan, held at Lodwar on the 1st of October 2021 to deliberate on the grading of that sections of Nadapal River along the El Road. I got that document. This document was signed by the governor of Eastern Equatoria State, Governor Lovongle Jore. He signed this document, and this document is also in circulation on social media. So this is the second deal after the 2009 deal. This is now the second deal. And what is very strange in this second document is that a state from another country can go and sign a deal with regard to an international frontier with another country. I think this is a violation of the internal protocol within the government. The government itself or the government alone violated actually the code of conduct or the protocol which is supposed. Because any agreement between a country has to be an agreement between one country and another country, not between a state from within a country and another country. No. This one is strange. And it shows that the government is not in harmony with itself. And so I was making my comment on the tweet by Abraham Mutai. Did Kenya help South Sudan during the war? The answer is yes. Did they hosted us during the time of war? The answer is yes. But John Core added that they were doing this because they are a member state of the international community. And it is in the international law that whenever there is conflict and insecurity in certain area, the neighboring countries have to allow the refugees from that conflict zone to cross into their borders, yes, and get a refuge. So the Kenyan did this, and we are thankful that they did this to our people. Up to now, many of our people are still in Kenya, in Nairobi, and in other parts. But we should not forget that Kenyans have not been generous enough to our people. People were also harassed. If they get you walking in the street and you don't have a resident permit, You can be arrested, you can be put in jail, you can be mistreated. So a lot of our people, I met a lot of our people who were in Kenya, and they were talking about this, that Kenyans are not generous enough. Yes, they are generous and they did good things, but at some point, our people were mistreated. Some people disappeared for good, you see. So these are some difficulties that our people face there in Kenya. So the question is, was that help which was offered to us by Kenya, was it in exchange for land, or was it an expression of solidarity with an African brother fighting for freedom and deserve to be held from his African brothers in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and beyond? To my mind, I think what Kenyan did, what the Tanzanian did, the Rwandan, the Ugandan, all the neighboring countries, what they did to our people since the time of Anyanya until the time of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, the Sudan People Liberation Army, what they did was an expression of solidarity as Africans toward their African brothers. They were doing it that way. They were not doing it so that they can come and boast about it today. Abraham Motai did on Twitter. Now, another thing is the spirit of Pan-Africanism and borders. We are Pan-Africanists. As Pan-Africanists, we believe that Africa is one nation. Our Pan-African pioneers, Osagifu, Dr. Kwame Nkrumah, Julius Nyerere, David Kenneth Kaunda, Ahmed Sikoto, Samura Michel, and others have taught us that we are one nation, and we are one nation as African. Critically into the current political and the geopolitical setup, Africans are not yet ready to embrace the idea of one nation, one African nation, or the idea of the United African States. And because Africans are not yet ready to embrace this idea of African nation, we are not also ready to be victims of African patriotism at the expense of others. We cannot allow our brothers and sisters from Kenya to take our land because we are Pan-Africanists and we believe in the idea of one African nation. Yes, it is a good idea, but as long as it is not yet practical, not yet made operational all over Africa, we cannot become victims of such an idea. This is one thing I want to underscore here. The territories that are encroached upon by our neighboring countries, our neighboring sisterly countries, we start with the Republic of Kenya, and I have to name the areas they have encroached upon and they have occupied. The Republic of Kenya had encroached upon the following areas and occupied them. Number one, Nadapal. As we speak here, Nadapal is encroached upon and occupied by Kenya. Number two, Lotimur. This area called Lotimur was given a name. It was called New Side by John Garang, the leader of the liberation movement. But the original name is Lotimur. That is number two. Number three, Namurunyan is also occupied by Kenya. Number four, Nakodok. It was occupied last week. Number five, and the last one is Narus. It is now occupied by Kenya. It was also occupied last week. And we have shown you the video of the citizen taking into the street to demonstrate against encroachment of Kenya and occupation of our land. Yes, Jonko.
And Narus, just to make a comment on Narus, Narus is even inside deeper and deeper if we have to talk, So that's very strange there to see Nauru's listed on the list of those who have been, occupied. Maybe Nadapal is right there on the border, which is, a territory of South Sudan, but it's not deeper like Nauru's. Can you imagine? Go ahead, Ingrid.
Yeah, thank you. Many people in Clubhouse here are making a lot of comments. Those who had actually been to Kenya, I have never been in Kenya. I once time went to Kenya, and I was passing transit via the airport. And so they said here, one of them, Hajir E. Assas Lion King. This is what he said. They never hosted us for free. We pay a high price, ya Jama. Don't buy into cheap claims. This is
indeed
a comment by someone who has been to Kenya. Those who were in the refugee camp in Kenya. So the people of South Sudan that in Kenya were not there for free. They were being taxed. They have been paying for the authorities, especially those in the cities. Those who were at Kakuma were staying there for free because it is an area actually given to the refugees. Okay, territories encroached upon by Uganda. We have now known the territories which are encroached upon and occupied by Kenya. We go to Uganda. The neighboring sisterly Republic of Uganda encroached upon the following areas and occupied them. Number 1, Oraba and Panyumi in Morobo County of Central Equatoria State. Bare, Afuji, Abaya, Bomere, Gobur, Pure, and Kirewa at Kajukaji County of Central Equatoria State. Bira, Kenanguruk, and Seretenya at Ikotos County. And Ilegu and Gomormo, Owino, Olui, and Adudi in Magui County of Eastern Equatoria State. These are areas occupied by the Republic of Uganda. You can write them down. These areas were reported occupied by the local communities to the National Dialogue Steering Committee in the final recommendation of the National Dialogue. That's where I got them. If you have the final recommendation of the National Dialogue, which was concluded in November 2020, you will find that the citizen, our people from those areas, they reported these areas and they are written there in that document. That's where I took them from. These are the areas occupied by Uganda in Central Equatoria State. Now, territory is encroached upon by Central African Republic. They are 5 in number. Yubu in Tombora County. Basukambi and Sakure in Anzara County. Gangura in Yambio County. And Nabanga in Iba County of Western Equatoria State. There are 4 areas occupied by the Central African Republic. These areas were also reported occupied by the local communities to the National Dialogue Steering Committee in the final recommendations of the National Dialogue, which was concluded in November 2020. Territories encroached upon by the Democratic Republic of Congo. The Democratic Republic of Congo occupied the following areas. Number 1, there are 3 areas. Number 1, Kimba. Number 2, Lojulo. And number 3, Kaba in Morobo County. These are areas occupied by the Central African Republic. These areas also came in the final report, the recommendation of the National Dialogue. You can get them in that document. Territory is encroached upon and occupied by the Sudan. The following areas have been encroached upon and occupied by the Republic of the Sudan. Number one, Abyei. They occupied and they are still claiming Abyei to be part of their land, despite the international rule on Abyei in July 2009. Two, Pantau. We call it Pantau in our one of our national languages, and they call it Hijli in their own language. Number three, Karasana. Number four, Nyama. Number five, Hofrat Nehas. Number six, Kafia Genje. Number seven, Kiradim or Mile 14 in the language of the negotiations in Addis Ababa. The next one is Rumaker. And the headquarters of Rumaker is in Meram. And then you have Kaka Tijaria. You have Kidguam. Kidguam, they call it Magenis, but the real name is Kidguam. And then you have Untau. Untau, they call it Joda. But we call it Untau. These are 11 areas occupied by the Republic of of Sudan. The neighboring Sudan, the country we succeeded from. Now, we have to talk about factors which led to losing areas of territorial integrity. There are numerous factors which led to the loss of territorial integrity, and they are as follows. Number one, lack of internal cohesion in our country. We, the people of South Sudan, we have lack of cohesion, and this lack of cohesion was caused by our political leaders, as John Cole said it earlier. And this lack of internal cohesion in our country resulted into the following. Number one, power struggle between leaders of the SPLM. Number two, Monday, December 15, 2013, first SPLM civil war. The July 2016 State House J1 civil war, which was called dogfight. Persistent communal violence all over the country. Number five, lack of national army to be deployed on all our borders so that we protect our borders. All this resulted into a state of chronic fragility and vision and program of nation building. It was the right time, and therefore, for the neighboring countries to come in and occupy our area. Because our leaders disagreed, and the country was taken to civil war, no program for nation building. When the neighboring countries saw that these people are not united, when they saw that these people are in this weak, they came in and they gradually took our land. This is how we got into this situation, dear brothers and sisters. Another question is, why are the neighboring countries occupying our territories? Why are they doing this? John Kor gave you part of the answer earlier. But now let me give you another answer. Our country is rich with numerous natural resources. However, it is unfortunately run by leaders who were described by the IGAD Secretary, Mr. Mahbub Muallim, in June 2014 as stupid leaders. The statement attributed to Muallim was then construed to have targeted the personality of the president, but it was a description applicable to all our leaders in both government and opposition. The neighboring countries are occupying our areas to plunder our natural resources. They are on a mission of economic expansion. They are exploiting lack of internal cohesion and fragility for their own economic advantages. These are the reasons why the neighboring countries are occupying our territories, dear brothers and sisters. And so this one is indirectly a call for all South Sudanese to unite. To unite themselves against the political leaders who are mismanaging our country, so against our brothers and sisters from the region who are coming in now to take our land. And we the people of South Sudan, we never are going to a neighboring country to occupy their land. So this is a campaign, dear brothers and sisters. It is a campaign, dear brothers and sisters, to plunder our natural resources. It is a scramble by the neighboring countries for our country, as the Europeans scrambled for resources in the 19th century. This is the same thing they are doing now. I would like to conclude with recommendations.
But before
issues of international boundaries, yes?
Before you conclude, I was going to play actually a researcher, which is the Chief Justice in Kenya, who actually said this part is South Sudan. I want to play those video of the map from Kenyan perspective as well.
Yes, thank you for that. I think I forgot. Go ahead, play that one. A Kenyan lawyer confirming that Ilimi is our land. Thank you, Jonko. Go ahead.
Me to look at a very difficult problem that has persisted in this country, or had persisted in this country from the time of independence. That is the difficulty of an international boundary between Kenya and Sudan. I was entrusted with that task. Ultimately, government, together with the British Council, sponsored me to undertake a Master's in Law program at London School of Economics, and as part of the LLM program, to undertake original research in Kenya-Sudan boundary. I was at LSC. I spent numerous hours at Public Records Office because commissioners, all the documents of this republic during the colony and protectorate status, all those documents are at Public Records Office. I'm sure commissioners, you know where Public Records Office is towards Heathrow Airport at Kew Gardens. So I had to commute from LSC, which is at the Strand, and go to this Public Records Office every other single day, and I acquired a wealth of material. In 1 minute, commissioners, at the turn of towards 1914, the boundary was defined by the British government as a straight line between two fixed points, or in the alternative, such a line that would give to us the customary grazing grounds of the Turkana. Those grazing grounds were never defined, but towards 1938, a survey party established that the boundary was slightly above the straight line. That was not to be. We went on, and Sudan demarcated what they call 1950 Sudanese patrol line. That Sudanese patrol line is what actually triggered my interest in this area. And by application of principles of international law, I actually established that when any government allows a competing government to administer an area, the doctrines of acquiescence, doctrines of renunciation of territory, they all kick in. I hope we'll have an opportunity to discuss this in greater detail, but in one sentence, we were able, or I was able in my research, to establish that the Sudanese patrol line, which is a considerable distance from the straight line, is now the international boundary. So, commissioners, I'm sure you all remember, in 1980s, the Kenya-Sudan boundary was indicated as a straight line. Then in 1985-86, we had an extended boundary that went towards Sudan. The difference in graphic terms is that through this research and the validation that went on in government, we were able to change our international boundary from the straight line to the new boundary, and we acquired 9,680 square kilometers. To put it in context, the former Western Province was 7,400 square meters. So we acquired a territory larger than the former Western Province. This is one of my research papers. It went through government, it went through validation. I cannot say that it was singular effort. The Attorney General and other organs of state all participated, and ultimately we changed our boundary. I then went to private practice from 1987.
There you have it, Ustaz Dengdira York, proven Sudanese international boundary line was 1950s. Period. He did the researches, he went through a government validation, and here you have it. Why are they doing this now? For the reason that you have mentioned. Let me play the other one, or do you wanted to jump in?
No, you can play the other one, then I will come in. Thank you.
Western tip of each of these three maps. The difference you see in... Look at these three maps of Kenya. Can you spot the difference? Now look at the northwestern tip of each of these three maps. The difference you see in each of them is what is likely to be the genesis of Kenya's first real quarrel with South Sudan. This is the Ilemi Triangle, and the government of South Sudan is claiming it back. The region measures 10,000 square kilometers, bigger than many countries across the world. But why it is important now has less to do with its size than what could be under it. Oil and mineral riches have long been thought to be in the Ilemi Triangle, and the discovery of oil in Gamia, about 100 kilometers away from the southern border of the Ilemi Triangle, strengthens those assumptions. The government of Southern Sudan wants the Ilemi Triangle based on its assertion that Kenya looks like this. This first picture shows Kenya at 1902. The straight line across from Lake Turkana westward was Kenya's first administrative border in that region, drawn by a British soldier named Philip Maud. But as time passed, constant attacks against the Turkana by the Toposa and Dachanes communities from southern Sudan and Ethiopia held it that the British government requested the Sudan Condominium, which had administrative power over Sudan, to redraw its boundaries to allow the King's Rifles to pursue bandits across the region, as well as for seasonal grazing of the cattle of the Turkana on both sides of the border. Thus, that tip of Kenya evolved into this. The Kenyan government would later build police posts there and assume administrative control of the region. And since before South Sudan's independence, the country had been in constant turmoil, that status quo was not challenged, up to today. Kenya's assertion of its ownership of the Ilemi Triangle is a treaty drawn in 1932, where Sudan ceded administrative control of the region to Kenya. Assistant Minister for Foreign Affairs Richard Onyonka expressed surprise at South Sudan's move to go to the International Court for Justice over this, but said that if that was the decision that the South Sudanese had taken, then Kenya would also engage it legally. Given that this region has a potential for another three-letter word that isn't oil, war, Onyonka said that Kenya still considers South Sudan as a friendly nation. However, Onyonka also admits that security has been beefed up in the region. So will Kenya hold on to the Elemi Triangle? Or like the Migingo debacle, will the public be treated to a spectacle of a government's lack of drive to protect its territorial integrity? Time and the International Court of Justice hold that answer. John Alanamu, NTV.
Okay, Ustaz Dengida Yok, interesting with that report. And actually, I find it quite interesting. Also, they are showing, an army there on that video with the South Africa flag. I don't know what is it. I want to let you weigh in, Ustaz Dengida Yok, and then we move on from here. Thank you.
Well, I will not have a lot to say. All the reports and the videos you have played confirm what we said earlier. Kenyan lawyer is an expert of the border between the two countries, and if he has given his testimony to the authorities in Kenya, and he told them plainly, he told them crystal clear that this area belongs to the Sudanese people. When he told them that in the 1950s, national frontier between Kenya and Sudan along that straight line, which we call Moat Line A. So that is a great testimony, which is in favor of the people of South Sudan. And we appreciate him for being honest as a scholar who made a research and came out with those amazing facts and shared the facts with the public through the media on the Citizen TV. The second video also is an evidence that Kenya started in 1986 to produce and circulate widely the map which shows that Kenyan authorities actually incurs into the Sudanese area. And so by all the evidences that are available, the area is ours. And we, the people of South Sudan, should not give it up to anybody. It is our land. It is part of our country. It is part of Kapoite East County in our country. So it cannot be allowed to be taken by the neighboring countries. It is rich with oil and minerals, as we have heard. It has wildlife and livestock. The land is so fertile, it can be used for agriculture. And a lot of good things are there. So all we need to do is to stand up together as people of this country and do not allow anyone to invade it. Yes, coming to the recommendations that I want to make is my recommendations, I think, they are 8 in number, and I will read them out for us. But before I read them out, I would like to say that issues of international frontiers or boundaries between countries are not easy. They are not easily resolved. That's why they are not easy. At the same time, they are deadly. They are deadly because they can cause conflicts, and they are mostly persistent. They can persist for a long time. A dispute on a border can persist for 10 to 20 years, 40 years, 50 years, and beyond. We have many examples in the world. You have the example of Kashmir between India and Pakistan. You have the example of Israel and Palestine. You have the example of Western Sahara and Morocco in West Africa. And many other examples. And we therefore recommend the following. Number one, the government must protest against all border encroachments by the neighboring countries. But the problem is that our government is involved in secret deals. So we call for the cancellation of all these secret deals, the one signed by the governor of Eastern Equatoria, General Lobong, and the other one which was signed in 2009. All these secret deals have to be cancelled because you cannot sell the land for the sake of your temporary interest, and tomorrow you will die, but this country will remain for your children and for the children of your children, your grandchildren and the children of your children. So when you are in authority, it means you are entrusted with the responsibility. You cannot sell out the country. So what our leaders do, what they did, is a great mistake. Number two, the government must engage the neighboring countries and negotiate with them in order to reach a peaceful resolution and tangible delimitation and demarcation of borders must be made. Number three, the government, aided by our experts, must provide the historical evidence that South Sudan owns these areas to the continental leaders at African Union. We have all the documents that prove that this is our area. You have already played some videos. And those who are speaking in those videos are not us, the South Sudanese, they are the Kenyan. They are the Kenyan themselves, testifying that the area belongs to the Sudan. So they don't have any right to come and occupy it and take it. We, the people of South Sudan, we are peaceful people. We respect our neighbors. But if our neighbors don't respect us, I think we will have less respect for them. Now, in recommendation number 3, I'm calling on our experts. Our experts must now rise up and play their role. Because you have seen the Kenyan expert giving their testimony and playing a role of true witnesses to what had been happening. He began his speech by saying that he would like to tell the public facts about a problem that had persisted for so long in this country. And then he went into the details. We really thank him for his honesty. As an expert, as a scholar, as a researcher. 4, South Sudanese must cease opposing the government through the force and use peaceful political means, political gains, or for achieving political gain. Why? Because armed opposition for the last 10 years had caused lack of intention, ethnic divide, hatred, destruction of social fabric. Therefore, the people of South Sudan have to cease from opposing the government through arms. We have to authorize peaceful means for opposing the government. Because when you take arms and then people fight, is lack of internal cohesion. And when we are seen weak by others, then take our land, as it has happened over the last 10 years. Number 5, the government must embark on the program of training special forces for our borders to prevent any future incursion by the neighboring countries into our territorial integrity. We must have forces for the protection of the borders. Otherwise, in the next 10 years, this country would all be taken by the neighboring countries. It has started very recently. It started from 2014, 2015, coming up to the present time. I used to travel from Juba via Numili, and our border with Uganda from Numili with a small area called Atiak. Atiak is far away. It is a distance from Numili. We used to cross a distance in the forest, and then we go to Atiak. The migration office of the Ugandan authority was at Atiak until 2010. That was the last time I traveled by land from Juba to Numili, and from Numili by land to Uganda, Kampala. And now it started from 2014. And you will all recall that Uganda is one of the countries that came in with the troops when our political leaders quarreled and fought. Then Uganda interfered. Uganda came in with the troops, and then they became an ally to the government in Juba, and they fought alongside the government forces against our own rebels. Now, this is the result of that interference. And Jonkur mentioned this one earlier. I'm glad that you mentioned it. That this guy actually gave wrong advices to our president because he doesn't want to see this country progressing. Number 6, all political parties and political activists raise awareness among our people on the issues of borders between us and the neighboring countries to build a national consensus. That more than a room, as I speak here, on more than a room is discussing this issue. And so this issue brought us together as people of South Sudan. Number 7, peaceful demonstrations must continue against the encroachments into our territorial integrity by the neighboring country. It started last week in Narus, and I'm here saying it has to continue. Number 8, last one, the use of military force to restore our areas should come as a final resort if the workability of peaceful option is proven ineffective in the long run. We vow to protect our nation. Oh God, bless South Sudan. Thank you very kindly.
Indeed, thank you, Sas Dengida Yok. With that, actually, I would like to conclude, unless you wanted to add anything else, but phenomenal, well done presentation on the issues of the border crisis between us, between our country and the neighboring countries. And also we did talk about freeing our brother, Maurice Mabior Awikjok back, who has been detained, who has been kidnapped and detained by national security in Juba. So is that actually, because this issue is very, very, very important, as I said from the beginning, when we close here, I want you guys, because we want to give an opportunity for some people actually to weigh in their perspective. Though I know those here who are here in the United States, today is a Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl actually is going to start in 1 hour and 30 minutes, and I know it's going to take a lot of people away from Clubhouse continuing, but I want to throw there. If you wanted to weigh in, I see a lot of people, on the Clubhouse who wanted to make their comment. We want to give that opportunity for you to weigh in your comment. But for now, if we suddenly don't have anything else to say, we would like to conclude. But look, we cannot give up. We cannot give up any inch of our country. I know political weakness, that's what got us to this situation that we are in, for the neighboring countries to come to claim territory that doesn't belong to them. And because we did not have a national plan, South Sudan is a land, deadlocked land, as I said it from the beginning, and we should have planned things so we cannot be manipulated either from Sudan or Kenya or Uganda. We should have that opportunity of building refineries so we can refine the oil locally, and then we will be able, to give it even to Sudan. They can buy from us and avoid, being manipulated like discriminatory fees that have been imposed on us on cooperation agreement in 2012 that took place in Addis Ababa. So with that, this is an awareness for all of you, the people of South Sudan, to know that we are bigger than this, and we have to pull our paws together, because this country is our future, is the future generation of our kids and our children. And it's very, very important for you to stay alert and weigh in and have your voice heard. I was hoping, to hear something from the leadership since Pope came to the country. At least we can put our paws together and then move toward reconciliation and peace and fair and election in coming, time. But it seemed like Juba is still numb. Juba is still muted, as Ustaz Dengdi put. Juba is still quiet. But we hope for the best. With that, I would like to conclude here, and we will transition to a clubhouse. But I want to leave you with this song from Emak, the young artist who is singing actually in Dinka and actually at the same time. Okay, you want to say something, Dengdi?
Yeah, what I want to say is for people here on Clubhouse, there are people who have been raising up their hands. We have Hajir and others. I want to tell them, please come up to weigh in. And I have already invited you. Sorry, we could not allow you earlier because we were making the presentation. And so in our plan, we said that we have to complete the presentation, then those others who would like to come in would come in later. So ladies and gentlemen in the room, you can come and have your say. But you can conclude there, Jonkor, and after you finish, you can join me here. Thank you.
Yes. Actually,
I hope Abdullah will come and join me here also.
Thank you, phenomenal. I would like to conclude actually with Emak, who is singing in Dinka and Acholi, and another singer who is singing in Acholi, and this guy is singing Dinka, and I don't know, beautiful rhythm, and they resemble it together, and it's this at the same time. So I know you guys will enjoy this. Don't just close your thing, and after that I will come with you. It takes like 3 minutes, not that long. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, hey, my God. Shut up. Angela Panna Jolly, Nang Panding Tonkian. Angela Panna Jolly, Nang Panding Tonkian. Hey, my welcome. Feeling and like a patchouli. Hey, my down like feeling and like a patchouli. Angela Panna Jolly, Nang Panding Tonkian. Angela Panna Jolly, Nang Panding Tonkian. Hey, my welcome. Feeling and like a patchouli. Hey, my down like feeling and like a patchouli. Hey, my body, yellow waka. Lording Lord Atole. Akira woman, waka. Lording Lord Atole. Hey, my body, yellow waka. Lording Lord Atole. Akira woman, waka. Lording Lord Atole. Lording Lord Atole. Lording Lord Atole. Mana no te chamba mo pino maliye pero pa tacha temo temo aniro temo We break it down, we turn it up, actually dance. Hey, yeah. Wamiela, miela, wanyona, nyona, actually sound. Hey, yeah. Lucky you're wrong, Odi Megan. Hey, yeah. Hey, yeah. God on your back, there's no challenge, Odi Megan. Hey, yeah. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongken. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongken. Hey, my welcome. Feeling like a patchouli. Hey, my down like feeling like a patchouli. Majuka down, Modena way, Modena UI, Modena thing. From my wheel to Dubai, from Benfield to Go Town, Kajoketi, back to from Nairus to Yambio, Kaya, from Natinga to Tukudu, to the Don, Ogadelo, Ajujajok, Ajoli dance, Kia, 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 Kia. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongkien. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongkien. Hey, my welcome, feeling like a patchouli. Hey, my down like feeling like a patchouli. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongkien. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongkien. Hey, my welcome, feeling like a patchouli. Hey, my down like feeling like a patchouli. Hey, my body, yellow waka. Lord and Lord, I tole. Tangira, woman, waka. Lord and Lord, I tole. Hey, my body, yellow waka. Lord and Lord, I tole. Tangira, woman, waka. Lord and Lord, I tole. Lord and Lord, I tole. Lord and Lord, I tole. Lord, I tell no. Lord, I tell no. Somebody on good quality. Yeah. Tomala pala white kela just tomala pala white kela kamala matino kamala madongo kamala matino kamala madongo and your gay and actually oh yeah I can't think I've been one of your con guy when you look up my baby was getting baby you and kiram yellow tanyani kwa just kalabia break up money celebration time and party time actually dance. Yeah, celebration time and party time. Actually, start. Chichiko, Chichiko, you look at that, Chichiko. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongkien. Enchila panna chole, neng panding tongkien. Hey, my mama, feeling like a patchouli. Hey, my darling, feeling like a patchouli.
Indeed, and Chilapana Choli Lung Pandeng Tonkayen. I love the song.